The wind howled across the barren plains, carrying with it the smell of dust and the fading warmth of the sun. Tom McAllister, a weathered cowboy with a heart shaped by years of solitude, guided his horse along the narrow trail that cut through the dry canyon. The world around him was silent, save for the rhythmic sound of hooves against the cracked earth. He had grown accustomed to silence. After losing his wife to illness years ago, silence had been his only companion. And yet, that night, silence was broken by something he could never have imagined. It was faint at first, almost like the whisper of the wind. But then it came again, clearer this time. A sound so small, so fragile, it nearly stopped his heart. Ma, ma. Tom pulled hard on the reins, his horse coming to a startled halt. He held his breath, listening. The sound rose again, a tiny, desperate cry. His chest tightened as he swung his leg over and leapt to the ground, boots crunching against gravel. His eyes scanned the shadows until they landed on something strange at the base of a scrubby bush, an old burlap sack, tied at the top, trembling ever so slightly. Fear shot through him. He knelt, untying the knot with shaking hands, and pulled the sack open. What he saw nearly knocked him off balance. Inside, swaddled in scraps of cloth, lay a baby. A baby so small, her cheeks still rosy from the warmth of life, her tiny fists clenched tight. Her lips trembled as she whispered again, "Ma, ma." Tom froze. For years, he thought his heart had turned to stone, too wounded to feel. But in that moment, something cracked inside him. His throat burned as he carefully lifted the infant into his calloused arms. She was light, fragile, like holding hope itself. "Lord Almighty," he whispered. "What kind of soul would leave you here to die?" He looked around, but there was no one. Just the endless stretch of prairie, as if the earth itself had hidden this secret for him to find. He wrapped his coat around the child, cradling her close to his chest. Her tiny fingers brushed against his shirt, and a wave of warmth shot through him, thawing the cold years of grief he'd carried. Tom wasn't a man of impulsive decisions. Ranch life had taught him discipline and patience. But now, staring into the wide, pleading eyes of this abandoned child, he knew this wasn't a decision at all, it was destiny. She needed him, and perhaps, in some strange twist of fate, he needed her. He mounted his horse with the baby bundled against him and rode hard toward his small ranch, heart pounding with every hoofbeat. As the cabin came into view, he felt the weight of what had just happened settle onto his shoulders. He was a cowboy, not a father. He had no crib, no milk, no idea how to care for something so delicate. But he had arms strong enough to hold her, a fire to keep her warm, and a heart that suddenly beat with new purpose. That night, Tom barely slept. The baby cried softly, and each time, he rocked her in his arms, whispering words he hadn't spoken in years. "It's all right, darlin'. You're safe now. I got you." He fed her with warm milk from a rag, clumsy but determined. With every sigh, every yawn from the child, Tom's world shifted. For the first time since his wife's passing, his cabin felt alive. By morning, rumors had already begun to spread. A ranch hand passing through town claimed he saw Tom carrying a baby into his home. Soon, curious neighbors arrived, whispering questions. Who would abandon a baby? Why here? And why Tom? Some doubted his ability to raise a child. "You're a loner, Tom," one neighbor remarked. "You got no business with a baby. Best take her to the orphanage." But Tom stood tall, the baby tucked firmly in his arms. "She was left to die," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I heard her call for her mama. Maybe I can't be her mama, but I'll be damned if I don't try to be the next best thing. She deserves a chance at life." The neighbors fell silent. No one could argue with the fire in his words. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The baby, whom Tom named Grace, for she had been nothing short of God's grace in his life, grew stronger under his care. He learned to mix formula, to sew tiny clothes, to soothe her with gentle songs late into the night. Each milestone, her first smile, her first laugh, her first attempt to crawl, etched itself into his heart like sunlight on stone. But it wasn't always easy. There were nights when she cried until dawn, nights when Tom feared he wasn't enough. He had no partner to share the burden, no mother to guide him. Yet every time doubt crept in, Grace would reach for his finger, her small hand gripping tight, and the strength would return. He had once believed his life had ended with his wife's passing. But Grace showed him it was only just beginning. The true test came one stormy night nearly a year later. A knock thundered against his cabin door. Tom opened it to find a young woman standing drenched in the rain, her eyes red from weeping. She looked at him, then past him, to the crib where Grace lay sleeping. "That's my baby," the woman whispered, trembling. "Please, she's mine." Tom's breath caught. The words cut deep, and for a moment, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The woman explained through sobs that she had been desperate, abandoned by her family, and left the child to die out of fear. But every night since, guilt had consumed her until she could no longer bear it. She had returned, hoping, praying that somehow her daughter had survived. Tom's heart waged war within him. Grace was his whole world. He had nursed her from the edge of death, given her every ounce of love he had left. The thought of losing her was unbearable. But then he looked at the woman, broken and pleading, and he saw something he hadn't expected: remorse, love, and a longing to make things right. He sat silently, rocking Grace gently, torn between his own aching heart and the possibility of redemption. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but soft. "This child deserves a mother who will fight for her, not abandon her. If you truly are that mother now, you'll prove it every day of her life. But if you're here to take her and disappear again, I won't allow it." Tears streamed down the woman's face as she swore she would never leave Grace again. She begged Tom to let her try. For hours, they talked. About life, about choices, about second chances. And as dawn broke, Tom realized something profound. Perhaps Grace hadn't just been sent to save him. Perhaps she had been sent to save her mother too. What followed wasn't easy. At first, Tom watched closely, hesitant to trust. But the young woman returned day after day, bringing small gifts, helping to care for Grace, and proving with every action that she was determined to change. Slowly, Tom's guarded heart softened. He began to see that love wasn't about possession, it was about giving, about believing in redemption, about creating family where none existed. In time, the woman, whose name was Clara, became part of their lives. Not as a threat, but as an addition. Together, she and Tom raised Grace with devotion. And in that unlikely union, 3 broken souls found healing. Years later, when Grace was old enough to understand, she would sit on Tom's lap by the fire, her big eyes wide as he told the story. "They left you in a sack," he'd say gently. "But you were stronger than the darkness. You called for your mama, and that call saved us all." Grace would smile, resting her head on his chest, and whisper the word that had once cracked open his frozen heart: "Papa." And Tom would hold her tight, his eyes misting over, knowing that sometimes the most unexpected voices, the smallest cries in the darkest nights, carry the power to change the world.